Chapter 1, The Empty Store. In the heart of a quiet suburban town stood the Harper's Mart supermarket, a once bustling center of everyday life. Now, it stood abandoned, a relic of a time when the aisles were filled with the hum of activity and the clatter of shopping carts. The store's neon lights had long since flickered out, leaving only darkness and an unsettling silence. Lydia Caldwell, an investigative journalist with a reputation for delving into the strange and mysterious, had heard the whispers about Harper's Mart. The rumors spoke of inexplicable events, of eerie occurrences that had driven customers and employees alike away. With her curiosity piqued and her sense of duty as a journalist ignited, Lydia decided to investigate the supermarket's dark secrets. As she entered through the sliding glass doors, which creaked open with an ominous groan, Lydia was greeted by a wave of stale, musty air. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty aisles. The shelves, once filled with products, were now bare and coated in a thick layer of dust. Lydia's footsteps echoed through the cavernous space as she moved deeper into the store. The fluorescent lights above were dark and lifeless, their once bright glow now a distant memory. The store was frozen in a state of unsettling stillness, as though time itself had stopped. In the back of the store, Lydia noticed a faint, flickering light. Drawn to it, she approached with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The light emanated from a small office, its door slightly ajar. As she pushed the door open, she was met with a sight that made her blood run cold. On the desk lay an old, dusty ledger, its pages yellowed with age. The ledger was open to a page covered in scrawled notes and cryptic symbols. At the top of the page was a date, July 13th, the very day the store had abruptly closed. The notes were frantic and disjointed, speaking of a dark presence and voices in the aisles. Lydia's skin prickled with unease as she flipped through the ledger. The notes described a series of disturbing events, strange noises, unexplained shadows, and a growing sense of dread that had plagued the store. The final entry was a desperate plea for help, written in a hurried scrawl. A sudden, bone-chilling breeze swept through the office, extinguishing Lydia's flashlight. The darkness was absolute, and Lydia could feel a palpable, oppressive presence closing in on her. She fumbled for her phone, using its screen to light the room, but the source of the chill remained elusive. Chapter 2, The Whispering Aisles. With her flashlight back on, Lydia moved cautiously through the store's aisles, the ledger clutched tightly in her hand. The air grew colder as she ventured deeper into the supermarket, and the oppressive silence was occasionally broken by unsettling creaks and groans. As Lydia turned the corner into the cereal aisle, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. The shelves seemed to loom taller, their products replaced by eerie, shadowy figures that flickered at the edge of her vision. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, darting away as she turned her head. The whispers began softly, like a distant murmur. Lydia strained to hear, but the voices remained elusive, echoing faintly through the aisles. They seemed to be coming from all directions, their tones filled with a sense of urgency and desperation. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into fragmented phrases that Lydia could barely understand. "Help us, trapped, darkness." The sounds were disorienting, and Lydia felt a growing sense of unease. She pressed on, following the whispers as they guided her through the labyrinthine aisles. The store's layout seemed to shift and change, the familiar layout now a maze of twisting corridors and shadowy corners. In the frozen food section, Lydia found a large, dusty freezer with its door slightly ajar. The cold air from inside the freezer was more intense than the rest of the store, and Lydia could see her breath forming visible puffs in the icy air. She hesitated for a moment before pulling the door open wider. Inside the freezer was a scene of chilling desolation. The shelves were filled with old, frost-covered food items, their packaging long since deteriorated. But it was what lay on the floor that made Lydia's heart skip a beat, a collection of photographs, scattered haphazardly and partially obscured by the frost. The images depicted employees of the store, their faces etched with fear and desperation. Each photograph was dated with the same ominous date, July 13th. Chapter 3, The Shadow in the Meat Locker. The freezer's cold seemed to seep into Lydia's bones as she picked up the photographs, her hands trembling. The faces in the photos stared back at her with hollow eyes, their expressions hauntingly familiar. Lydia could feel the oppressive presence growing stronger, a sense of malevolent intent lurking just out of sight. With renewed determination, Lydia decided to investigate the meat locker at the back of the store. The whispers had grown more insistent, guiding her toward this specific location. The meat locker's heavy door was partially open, and a sense of dread washed over her as she approached. Inside, the meat locker was a chilling tableau of decay. The air was frigid, and the once organized meat hooks now hung empty and rusted. The cold seemed to penetrate Lydia's very core, and she could see her breath misting in front of her face. As she moved deeper into the locker, the whispers grew louder, almost as if they were trying to communicate directly with her. Lydia's flashlight beam swept across the room, illuminating something strange hanging from the ceiling. It was a large, dark stain that seemed to cover a portion of the floor and walls. The stain appeared to be blood, dried and crusted over with time. At the center of the stain was an old, tarnished key. She hesitated before picking up the key, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. The whispers grew louder, almost as if they were urging her to take the key and use it. Lydia felt a growing sense of urgency, as though she were on the verge of discovering something crucial. As she left the meat locker, Lydia noticed a door she had not seen before, hidden behind a stack of old, forgotten boxes. The door was locked, but the key she had found seemed to fit perfectly. With a deep breath, she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a hidden room that had been concealed for years. Chapter 4, The Dark Truth. The hidden room was small and dimly lit, illuminated only by the flickering glow of an old, dusty lamp. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange, occult objects, candles, ancient books, and bizarre trinkets. The air in the room was thick with an unsettling energy, and Lydia could feel the oppressive weight of the store's secrets pressing down on her. At the center of the room was a large, circular symbol painted on the floor. The symbol was intricate and filled with arcane symbols and patterns. Lydia recognized it from the cryptic notes in the ledger. This was a ritualistic symbol, one associated with dark forces and ancient rites. On a small altar in the center of the symbol lay an old, leather-bound book. The book was covered in dust, its cover adorned with the same symbol as the one on the floor. Lydia carefully opened the book, revealing pages filled with strange, handwritten text and illustrations of occult rituals. As she read through the book, Lydia discovered the horrifying truth behind Harper's Mart. The store had been the site of dark rituals performed by a secretive group of individuals seeking to harness malevolent forces for their own gain. The rituals had gone horribly wrong, unleashing a dark presence that had fed on the fear and suffering of those trapped within the store. The book detailed a final, desperate ritual designed to contain the dark presence, but it had been abandoned before it could be completed. The malevolent force had been left to fester, growing stronger and more insidious over time. The whispers Lydia had heard were the voices of those who had been caught in the ritual's aftermath, their souls trapped and tormented by the dark force. Chapter 5. The Final Confrontation. With the knowledge of the dark rituals and the malevolent force that had plagued the store, Lydia knew she had to act quickly to put an end to the horror. The final ritual outlined in the book required specific actions and items to banish the dark presence and release the trapped souls. Lydia gathered the necessary items from the hidden room, candles, herbs, and the ritualistic symbols. She returned to the center of the store, where the original symbol had been painted on the floor. With a sense of urgency, she began to set up the ritual as described in the book. The atmosphere in the store grew increasingly tense as Lydia performed the ritual. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic than before, filling the air with a cacophony of anguished cries. The temperature in the store dropped, and the darkness seemed to thicken around her. As Lydia completed the final steps of the ritual, the store was bathed in an eerie, otherworldly light. The shadows on the walls writhed and twisted, and the oppressive presence seemed to intensify. Lydia recited the incantations with a firm voice, her determination unwavering despite the fear that gripped her. The ritual reached its climax, and a blinding flash of light erupted from the symbol on the floor. The dark presence let out a deafening, guttural roar, and the store seemed to shake with the force of the ritual's power. Lydia shielded her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. When the light finally subsided, the store was eerily silent. The darkness that had once pervaded the aisles was gone, replaced by a sense of calm and relief. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the store's once foreboding shadows had dissipated. Exhausted but relieved, Lydia took one last look around the now peaceful store. The trapped souls had been freed, and the dark presence had been banished. Harper's Mart, once a place of horror and dread, had been cleansed of its malevolent force. As Lydia exited the store, the morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm, golden light over the suburban town. She felt a sense of accomplishment and closure, knowing that she had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious. The whispers and shadows of the past were gone, leaving behind a store that could finally be at peace.